It was past midnight when I got the text that changed everything. I was in my garage, elbow deep in the engine of my 1967 Mustang, trying to fix a carburetor that had been giving me trouble for weeks. The familiar smell of motor oil and the quiet hum of my work light created the kind of peace I'd grown to cherish. At 37, I'd learned that some of life's best moments happen when you're alone with your hands dirty and your mind clear. My name is Alex Rowan, and I used to believe that happiness was something you could build with your own hands. At 37, I had what everyone called the perfect suburban life. A decent job as an IT engineer at Morrison Tech Solutions, a 2-story house with a white picket fence in Millbrook Heights, and a wife who smiled at all the right moments during neighborhood barbecues. Emily Rowan was everything I thought I wanted when I married her 5 years ago. She worked as a marketing executive at Henderson & Associates, had this infectious laugh that could fill a room, and knew exactly how to make small talk with everyone from the mailman to my boss's wife. She was social in all the ways I wasn't, and I thought that made us perfect complements. But perfection, I learned, is just another word for carefully maintained lies. It was a cold October evening when I first noticed something was off. I was in the garage working on my 1967 Mustang Fastback, a restoration project that had been my weekend therapy for 3 years. The car was my pride and joy, a cherry red beauty that I'd bought as a rusted shell and slowly brought back to life. Emily used to joke that I loved that car more than her, and I'd always laugh it off. Now I realize she might have been testing the waters for her own betrayal. "Alex, I'm going out with Tara and Sean tonight," Emily called from the doorway leading to the kitchen. She was wearing a black dress I'd never seen before, and her makeup was more elaborate than usual for a casual night out with friends. Tara Blackwell was Emily's closest friend from work, a 35-year-old office coordinator with shoulder-length blonde hair and a habit of oversharing during dinner parties. Sean was Tara's husband, a real estate agent, who spent most of his time at the gym and talking about his BMW like it was a religious artifact. He had that smooth, practiced charm that made him successful at selling houses and, apparently, at other things too. "Since when do you go out with Sean?" I asked, not looking up from the carburetor I was rebuilding. "Oh, it's just a tradition we started. The 3 of us have been friends for years, and sometimes we like to hit the downtown bars without dragging you along to be bored by our work gossip." Something about the way she said tradition bothered me. It sounded rehearsed, like she'd practiced that explanation in front of a mirror. "What about Tara? She's okay with you 2 going out without her?" Emily laughed, but it had a sharp edge to it. "Alex, don't be ridiculous. Tara's the one who suggested it. She says Sean and I have similar taste in music and cocktails, so we make good bar companions. It's completely innocent." I finally looked up at her. "Bar companions?" "You're being paranoid." She walked over and kissed my forehead, leaving a faint lipstick mark that I'd later find on my work shirt. "We'll probably be back around midnight. Don't wait up." After she left, I sat in the garage for another hour, trying to focus on the engine work. But her words kept echoing in my head. Since when did married people need bar companions who weren't their spouses? Since when was it normal for a wife to go out regularly with another woman's husband? I started paying attention after that night. Really paying attention. Emily began staying out later on these tradition nights. First until midnight, then 1 in the morning, then 2. When I asked about it, she'd wave me off with stories about how the bars were so crowded they had to wait forever for drinks, or how they'd run into old friends and lost track of time. "You should trust me," she'd say, with that same practiced tone. "I've never given you a reason not to." But trust, I was learning, is something you verify. 3 weeks later, I was working late in my home office when I heard Emily's car pull into the driveway at 2:30 a.m. Through the window, I watched her get out of the passenger seat of Sean's BMW. He walked her to the front door, and they stood there talking in low voices for nearly 10 minutes before he finally left. When Emily came inside, I was waiting in the living room. "How was your night?" I asked. "Oh, same as always. Tara had a few too many Cosmos, so Sean offered to drive me home while she sobered up in the bathroom." "That was nice of him." "Yeah, Sean's really thoughtful like that." I nodded and went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. The next morning, I found a coffee cup in the kitchen sink that had lipstick on the rim. Not Emily's shade, but a deeper red that I'd seen Tara wear. When I asked Emily about it, she said Tara had stopped by earlier in the week to borrow a book. But I distinctly remembered Emily telling me that Tara was out of town visiting her mother that entire week. That's when I started documenting everything. Times, dates, inconsistencies, and stories. I wasn't proud of it, but I began checking Emily's phone when she was in the shower, looking through her text messages and call logs. Most of it was normal. Work conversations, plans with her sister, complaints about her mother's constant advice about when we were going to have kids. But there were gaps. Long periods where she'd receive no texts or calls, which was unusual for someone as social as Emily. And there were a few messages from Sean that seemed oddly formal, like they were being careful about what they put in writing. "Thanks for the great evening. Looking forward to next time. Had fun tonight. Sleep well. Can't wait to see you again soon." Innocent enough on the surface, but they felt wrong. They felt like the kind of messages you send when you're trying to hide something. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday night in November. Emily had gone out for another tradition evening, and I decided to drive downtown to see if I could spot them at any of the bars she'd mentioned. I felt like a private detective in a bad movie, but I needed to know the truth. I found Sean's BMW parked outside the Riverside Motel on the outskirts of town. Not a bar, not a restaurant, a cheap motel with hourly rates and neon signs that flickered like dying stars. I sat in my car for 2 hours watching the door to room 237. At 11:45 p.m., Emily and Sean emerged together. She was wearing the same black dress from that first night I'd noticed something was wrong, and he had his arm around her waist like they were a real couple. They kissed goodbye in the parking lot, not a friendly peck on the cheek, but a long, passionate kiss that made my stomach turn and my hands shake with rage. I drove home and waited. Emily walked through the front door at 12:30 a.m. with a story about how crowded the new jazz club had been and how she'd spilled wine on her dress, but managed to get most of it out in the bathroom. "You look tired," she said, studying my face. "You should get some sleep." "Yeah," I replied. I should. But I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to my cheating wife, staring at the ceiling and planning my next move. I wasn't going to confront her yet. I wasn't going to make a scene or demand explanations that would only give her time to craft better lies. I was going to be smart about this. I was going to gather evidence, document everything, and when the time came, I was going to make sure everyone knew exactly who Emily Rowan really was. At 1:07 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text message from Tara Blackwell. "I don't want to upset you, but your wife is having an affair behind your back." I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed back, "I know. It's your husband." The response came immediately. "Let's forget them. Want to go on a date tonight?" For the first time in months, I smiled. "Yes," I replied. Tara and I met at Murphy's Pub, a dimly lit Irish bar on the other side of town where neither of our spouses would think to look for us. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a whiskey neat in front of her and tears she was trying hard not to shed. "I can't believe I'm doing this," she said as I slid into the seat across from her. 6 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be meeting my friend's husband to talk about our cheating spouses, I would have laughed in their face. Tara looked different outside the context of neighborhood parties and double dates. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and without the bright smile she usually wore in social situations, I could see the exhaustion in her green eyes. She was pretty in an understated way that Emily's flashier beauty had always overshadowed. "How long have you known?" I asked. "I suspected for about a month, but I didn't have proof until tonight." She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo that made my blood run cold. It was Emily and Sean in what looked like Tara's living room, wrapped around each other on the couch I'd sat on dozens of times during dinner parties. "I came home early from my book club meeting and found them like this." "Jesus, Tara, I'm sorry." "Are you?" "Because part of me wonders if you're relieved to have someone else confirm what you already knew." She was right. As much as it hurt to see photographic proof of Emily's betrayal, there was a strange comfort in knowing I wasn't losing my mind. The past 2 months of gaslighting and carefully crafted lies had made me question my own judgment. "I followed them to a motel last week," I admitted. "Watched them kiss in the parking lot like teenagers, but seeing it and proving it are two different things." Tara finished her whiskey and signaled the bartender for another round. "So what do we do now? Confront them? File for divorce? Pretend this never happened and try to save our marriages?" "None of those," I said. "We make them destroy themselves." Over the next 2 hours, Tara and I crafted a plan that was both simple and devastatingly effective. We wouldn't confront our spouses directly. That would only put them on the defensive and give them time to coordinate their stories. Instead, we'd let them think they were getting away with their affair while we systematically gathered evidence and destroyed their reputations in the community that meant so much to both of them. Emily prided herself on being seen as the perfect wife and neighbor. She served on the Millbrook Heights Homeowners Association, organized the annual block party, and never missed a chance to remind people how happy our marriage was. Sean was equally image-conscious, using his charm and reputation as a family man to build his real estate business. "They want to have their cake and eat it too," Tara said, her voice getting stronger as the alcohol and anger kicked in. "They want the excitement of sneaking around while keeping all the benefits of being seen as devoted spouses. So let's take away the part they care about most, their precious reputations." "I never believed in karma," I told her, "but tonight she's wearing a red dress and drinking whiskey." Tara laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd heard from her all evening. "You know what? I like this version of you better than the quiet, polite husband I've known for 3 years. Maybe that's been part of the problem. Maybe I've been too quiet and polite." We exchanged phone numbers and agreed to coordinate our efforts. Tara would use her position in Emily's inner circle to gather information and plant seeds of doubt among their mutual friends. I would handle the technical aspects, documenting their movements, gathering photographic evidence, and finding ways to expose their lies without directly implicating ourselves. "One more thing," Tara said as we prepared to leave. "When this is all over, when we've burned their lives to the ground and everyone in Millbrook Heights knows what kind of people they really are, what happens to us?" I looked at her across the table, this woman who'd been betrayed just as badly as I had, who was smart enough to see through the lies and strong enough to fight back. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I'd like to find out." She smiled, and for a moment, the exhaustion and anger disappeared from her face. "Me too." The next morning, I started my surveillance in earnest. I installed a GPS tracker on Emily's car, legally questionable but not illegal since we were married, and it was registered in both our names. I set up a hidden camera in our garage after noticing that Emily had been spending time there, supposedly organizing holiday decorations, but actually making phone calls she didn't want me to overhear. Within a week, I had hours of recorded conversations between Emily and Sean, planning their next meetings and laughing about how oblivious their spouses were. "Alex actually asked me why I've been buying new lingerie," Emily said during one call, her voice dripping with contempt. "I told him I was trying to spice things up for him, and he believed it. God, he's so pathetic." "Tara's the same way," Sean replied. "She keeps asking if I'm happy in our marriage, like she can sense something's wrong, but she's too scared to really investigate. It's almost sad how trusting she is." Listening to those recordings was like being stabbed with a rusty knife, but they also crystallized my resolve. Emily wasn't just cheating on me, she was actively mocking me, treating our marriage like a joke and our shared life like an inconvenience she had to endure between her real moments of happiness with Sean. Tara was gathering intelligence from her end as well. Emily had apparently been confiding in their mutual friend Lisa about her complicated feelings for Sean, painting herself as a conflicted woman torn between duty and passion rather than a calculating adulteress. "She's telling people that you've been distant and cold lately," Tara reported during one of our clandestine coffee meetings, setting up the narrative that she was emotionally neglected and fell into Sean's arms for comfort. Of course she is. Can't just be a cheater, has to be a victim too. Lisa's buying it completely. She actually told me that maybe Emily deserves to be happy even if it's complicated. What did you tell her? That I hoped Emily knew what she was doing, because actions have consequences. Tara's smile was sharp as a blade. I also mentioned that I'd heard Sean has a gambling problem and owes money to some unsavory people downtown. Does he? Not that I know of, but Lisa loves gossip more than she loves the truth. By tomorrow, half of Emily's friend group will be wondering if your wife is getting involved with a man who has dangerous debts. Our plan was working perfectly. We were patient, methodical, and careful not to leave any fingerprints on the destruction we were orchestrating. But Emily and Sean were making it easy for us by being careless in their arrogance. The breaking point came 3 weeks later, when I followed them to the Riverside Motel again and watched Sean hand the desk clerk cash for a room. This time, I was prepared with a high-resolution camera and a telephoto lens. I got clear shots of them entering the room together, and more importantly, I got photos of Sean's license plate and the motel receipt he carelessly threw in the parking lot trash can. But the real prize came when they left the room 2 hours later. Emily had forgotten to zip up the back of her dress completely, and Sean's shirt was buttoned wrong, small details that would be devastating when shared with the right people at the right time. I sent the photos to Tara, who immediately forwarded them to her private group chat with 3 of Emily's closest friends, along with a message that said, "I'm so confused. Isn't that Emily's car? And why is she at a motel with Sean in the middle of the afternoon?" Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with calls and texts from neighbors and friends. But I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I went home and waited for Emily to return from her supposed client meeting. She walked through the door at 6 p.m. with a story about how her presentation had run long and she'd had to stay late to finalize the contract details. "Sounds like a productive day," I said, looking up from my laptop where I was reviewing the photos I'd taken. "Very productive. I think we're going to land the Henderson account, which would be huge for my career." "I'm proud of you," I said, and meant it. I was proud of how convincing a liar she'd become, how smoothly she could construct false narratives, how completely she'd committed to her double life. It took real skill to be that thoroughly dishonest. "You seem happy tonight," she said, studying my face. "Did something good happen at work?" "You could say that. I had a breakthrough on a project I've been working on for months. All the pieces finally came together." Emily smiled and kissed my cheek. "I love seeing you excited about your work." As she headed upstairs to shower off the evidence of her afternoon with Sean, I opened my laptop and began uploading the photos to a secure cloud storage account. Tomorrow, Tara and I would begin the final phase of our plan. But tonight, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Emily thought she was playing chess while I played checkers, but she was wrong. She'd been playing checkers while I'd been playing chess, and now it was time for checkmate. I picked up my phone and sent Tara a text. "Let the games begin." Her reply came immediately. "Game on." The next morning, I woke up with the kind of clarity that comes from having a purpose. Emily was still asleep beside me, her face peaceful in the early sunlight streaming through our bedroom windows. Looking at her, I felt nothing. No love, No anger, no regret. Just the cold satisfaction of someone who'd finally stopped being a victim and started being a player. My phone buzzed with a text from Tara. Phase 1 is in motion. Lisa called me at 6 a.m. crying about the photos. She's convinced Emily is making a huge mistake and wants to stage an intervention. I smiled and typed back, "Let me know when you need me to play my part." Emily stirred beside me, stretching like a cat in the sunshine. "Good morning, handsome. You're up early for a Saturday." "Couldn't sleep. Too excited about the weekend." "Oh? What do we have planned?" "Nothing special. Just looking forward to spending time with my wife." She kissed my forehead and headed to the bathroom, completely unaware that her world was about to implode. I listened to the shower running and used the time to check the neighborhood social media groups where Tara had planted the photos the night before. The response was everything we'd hoped for and more. The Millbrook Heights neighbors' Facebook group was buzzing with speculation and barely concealed gossip. Someone had shared the photos with the caption, "Isn't this Emily Rowan? Why is she at a motel with Sean Blackwell?" The comments section was a feeding frenzy of suburban moral outrage and schadenfreude. I always thought there was something off about those two at the block parties. Poor Tara and Alex. They seem like such nice people. This explains why Emily's been so distant at the HOA meetings lately. Sean always struck me as the type. Too smooth, you know? By the time Emily came downstairs for breakfast, the story had spread to 3 different neighborhood groups and been screenshot and shared dozens of times. Her phone was buzzing constantly with calls and texts, but she was ignoring them in favor of making coffee and scrolling through her work emails. "Popular morning," I observed, nodding toward her phone. "Probably just work stuff. You know how clients can be on weekends." But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she kept glancing at the phone like it was a snake that might bite her. She knew something was wrong, but she hadn't figured out what yet. At 10 a.m., Tara called me while Emily was outside watering her garden. "It's working better than we planned," she said, barely containing her excitement. "Sean's boss called him this morning asking about rumors circulating in the community that might affect his professional reputation. Apparently, Mr. Harker doesn't appreciate his top salesman being associated with adultery scandals." What did Sean tell him? That it was all a misunderstanding, that he was just helping a friend with a family crisis and the photos were taken out of context. But Harker isn't buying it. He told Sean to resolve this situation quickly and quietly or face a review of his position with the company. And Emily? Lisa confronted her an hour ago, called her crying and begging her to think about what she's doing to her marriage. Emily tried to deny everything, but Lisa had already shown the photos to Jennifer and Maria. The whole friend group is in chaos. Through the kitchen window, I watched Emily yanking weeds from her flower bed with unnecessary violence. Her phone was on the patio table beside her, buzzing every few minutes with new calls and messages she continued to ignore. "She's starting to panic," I told Tara. "But she's still in denial mode. Probably thinks she can talk her way out of this like she's talked her way out of everything else." Sean's past that point. He called me 20 minutes ago, furious, demanding to know if I was behind the photos. I played innocent, told him I was just as shocked as everyone else to see my husband with another woman. How did he respond to that? Started backtracking immediately. Said it wasn't what it looked like, that they were just talking, that someone was trying to make trouble for both our families. I let him dig his hole deeper for a few minutes, then told him I needed space to think about our marriage. Perfect. Keep him off balance while we move to Phase 2. Phase 2 involved Sean's prized BMW, a gleaming black sedan that he washed and detailed every weekend like it was a religious ritual. Sean had always been insufferably proud of that car, constantly mentioning its horsepower and luxury features during neighborhood gatherings. He'd once spent an entire barbecue explaining to anyone who'd listen why German engineering was superior to American muscle cars, pointedly looking at my Mustang while he spoke. That Sunday night, while Sean and Emily were having what I assumed was a crisis management meeting at another cheap motel, I paid a visit to the Blackwell driveway. I'd done my research on automotive sabotage. Nothing that would cause an accident or put anyone in danger, but enough to render the car undrivable and expensive to repair. Sugar in the gas tank was a myth that didn't actually work, but there were other options. I removed the valve cores from all 4 tires, letting them deflate slowly. I disconnected the battery cables and loosened several key engine components that would cause the car to stall and refuse to restart. Most importantly, I used a glass etching cream to write "cheater" in small letters on the inside of the windshield, invisible until the sun hit it at the right angle, when it would show up clear as day. The beauty of the plan was that Sean would discover the damage Monday morning when he was already running late for work, stressed about his conversation with his boss, and looking for someone to blame. I made sure our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, would witness his reaction by timing my own departure for work to coincide with his discovery. Mrs. Patterson was the unofficial neighborhood watch coordinator, a 70-year-old retired teacher who knew everyone's business and wasn't shy about sharing it. If Sean had a public meltdown in his driveway, it would be all over Millbrook Heights by lunchtime. I was pulling out of my garage when I heard Sean's voice carry across the street. "What the hell? What the hell?" Through my rearview mirror, I watched him circle his disabled BMW like a man surveying a natural disaster. The tires were completely flat, the hood was up, revealing the sabotaged engine, and the morning sun was hitting the windshield at the perfect angle to illuminate my handiwork. Mrs. Patterson emerged from her house in her bathrobe, drawn by the commotion. "Sean, is everything all right, dear? Someone vandalized my car. Look at this. Look at what they did." "Oh my goodness. Do you think it's related to those photos that have been going around?" Sean's face went white, then red, then white again. "What photos?" "The ones of you and Emily at that motel. The whole neighborhood's been talking about it since Saturday. I just assumed you knew." I drove away before I could witness the rest of the conversation, but Tara called me an hour later with a full report. "Mrs. Patterson told everyone at the grocery store that Sean completely lost it," she said, laughing for the first time since this whole mess began. "Apparently he started screaming about how people needed to mind their own business and how the photos didn't show what everyone thought they showed. Then he kicked one of his flat tires and hurt his foot." "Did anyone call the police about the car?" "He did, but what are they going to do? File a report about some flat tires and minor vandalism?" The officer who responded basically told him it was probably teenagers and suggested he install a security camera. Speaking of security cameras, way ahead of you. I've been documenting everything from my living room window. Got some great footage of Sean's tantrum this morning, plus video of Emily sneaking over to comfort him while his car was being towed. That afternoon, Emily came home from work early with red eyes and a story about having a migraine. She'd obviously been crying, and her usual composure was cracking around the edges. "Bad day?" I asked, not looking up from my laptop. "Just work stress. The Henderson account is more complicated than I thought." "I'm sorry to hear that. Maybe you should talk to someone about it. Sometimes an outside perspective helps." "Maybe." She sat down heavily on the couch beside me. "Alex, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think people in this neighborhood have too much time on their hands? Like, do you think they create drama where none exists just to have something to talk about?" I closed my laptop and gave her my full attention. "What kind of drama?" "Oh, just silly gossip. You know how people can take an innocent situation and twist it into something scandalous." "Are you dealing with gossip about something?" Emily's laugh was forced and brittle. "It's ridiculous, really. Someone took some photos of me and Sean at completely innocent moments, and now people are acting like we're having some torrid affair. It's insulting and hurtful, and I don't understand why anyone would want to spread lies like that." "That does sound hurtful," I agreed. "What kind of innocent moments?" "Just normal friend stuff. We were at a restaurant discussing Tara's birthday party, and someone took a photo of us talking. Now suddenly we're secret lovers or something equally absurd." A restaurant? Emily's eyes flickered with uncertainty. Yes, a restaurant. We were planning a surprise for Tara, which is why we couldn't include her in the conversation. That's thoughtful of you both. I'm sure Tara will appreciate the effort. I hope so. I just wish people would mind their own business instead of trying to destroy friendships with malicious gossip. I nodded sympathetically, while internally marveling at her ability to rewrite reality. In Emily's version of events, she and Sean were thoughtful friends planning a surprise party, not adulterers caught in the act. The motel had become a restaurant, their affair had become party planning, and the people exposing their lies had become malicious gossips. You're right, I said. People should definitely mind their own business. That evening, while Emily was taking a bath, I received a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Tonight. Murphy's Pub. Come alone. Sean. I showed the message to Tara, who was monitoring the situation from her house across the street. He's desperate, she replied. Probably thinks he can intimidate you into backing down or convince you that Emily is the real victim here. Should I go? Absolutely. But I'll be there too, just in case. And Alex, bring your phone, record everything. At 9 p.m., I walked into Murphy's Pub to find Sean already there, nursing a whiskey and looking like a man who'd aged 5 years in 5 days. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit was wrinkled, and his confident smile had been replaced by a desperate grimace. Alex, thanks for coming. Sean. I sat down across from him and ordered a beer. You said we needed to talk. Look, I know this situation has gotten out of hand, and I think there's been a misunderstanding that's hurting everyone involved. What kind of misunderstanding? These photos that are going around, they're not what they look like. Emily and I are friends, nothing more. We've been planning a surprise for Tara's birthday, and we had to meet privately to coordinate the details. I took a sip of my beer and waited for him to continue. I know how it looks, meeting at that motel, but Emily was having car trouble and called me for help. I was in the area showing a property, so I picked her up and we went to discuss the party plans. The motel was just a convenient place to talk privately. Car trouble. Right. Her engine was making that noise, you know? The one that means expensive repairs if you don't address it quickly. I see. And you felt a motel room was the best place to discuss her engine problems? Sean's face flushed red. We weren't in a room, Alex. We were in the parking lot, sitting in my car. Someone took photos from a distance and made it look like something it wasn't. The photos I saw showed you both coming out of room 237. Then someone doctored them or took them on a different day. I'm telling you, nothing inappropriate happened between Emily and me. We're both happily married people who were trying to do something nice for our spouses. I leaned back in my chair and studied Sean's face. He was a good liar. Probably had to be, in real estate. But desperation was making him sloppy. His story had more holes than a screen door, and he was sweating despite the pub's cool temperature. Sean, can I ask you something? Of course. If you and Emily were just planning a party for Tara, why didn't you just tell her that when she asked about the photos? Why make up a story about helping with a family crisis? Sean's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. We wanted to keep the surprise intact. If Tara knew we were planning something, it would ruin the whole thing. So you thought it was better to let her think you were having an affair than to spoil a birthday surprise? It wasn't supposed to go this far. We thought the whole thing would blow over in a day or two. I finished my beer and stood up. Sean, I appreciate you taking the time to explain everything, but I think you should be having this conversation with Tara, not me. Alex, wait. He grabbed my arm as I started to leave. I need you to help me convince people that this is all a misunderstanding. Your marriage and mine are both at stake here. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. Take your hand off me. He released me immediately, but the desperation in his eyes intensified. Please. Emily's a good person, and so is Tara. Don't let gossip destroy 4 lives. You're right about one thing, I said. Tara is a good person. Emily, well, I guess we'll see. I walked out of the pub, leaving Sean alone with his whiskey and his lies. In the parking lot, I found Tara waiting by her car. How did it go? He's panicking. Tried to convince me that they were planning your birthday party, and the motel was just a convenient place to discuss the details. Tara burst out laughing. My birthday party? My birthday was 6 months ago, and we celebrated it at Romano's with 12 people. I didn't mention that. Good. Let him keep digging. Did you record it? I held up my phone. Every word. Perfect. Tomorrow, we move to phase 3. As I drove home, I felt that same cold satisfaction I'd experienced that morning. Sean and Emily were trapped in a web of their own making, and every move they made only tightened the noose around their necks. But the best part was still to come. Tomorrow, we'd find out just how far they were willing to go to protect their lies, and just how much damage they were willing to inflict on innocent people to save themselves. I parked in my driveway and looked across the street at the Blackwell house, where Sean's damaged BMW sat in the driveway like a monument to his hubris. Tomorrow, that car would be the least of his problems. Tomorrow, the real games would begin. Halloween arrived in Millbrook Heights like a gift-wrapped opportunity for revenge. The entire neighborhood transformed into a festival of masks and costumes, providing the perfect cover for the final act of Sean and Emily's public destruction. I spent the morning decorating our front yard with elaborate Halloween displays, including a haunted graveyard, complete with fog machines and motion-activated skeletons. Emily watched from the kitchen window, her face pale and drawn from a week of mounting pressure from friends, family, and neighbors who'd seen the motel photos. You're really going all out this year, she said when I came inside for coffee. I figured we should give the neighbors something to talk about besides gossip and rumors. Emily flinched at the word rumors, but managed a weak smile. That's thoughtful of you. I know this whole situation has been awkward for everyone. What situation is that? You know, the photos, the speculation. I'm just grateful that you trust me enough not to believe malicious gossip. I poured myself coffee and leaned against the counter. Emily, can I ask you something? Of course. If someone was spreading lies about me, if there were photos of me in compromising situations with another woman, what would you do? Her eyes flickered with something that might have been guilt or fear. I'd want to hear your side of the story first. I'd trust that there was an innocent explanation. And if there wasn't, if the photos showed exactly what they appeared to show, then I'd be devastated, but I'd want to work through it together, as a couple. That's good to know. That afternoon, Tara called with an update on Sean's increasingly desperate behavior. He's been calling in sick to work all week, she reported. His boss is furious about the missed appointments and the damage to the company's reputation. Apparently, 3 clients have specifically requested different agents because they don't want to work with someone involved in a moral scandal. How's his mood at home? Terrible. He keeps insisting that we need to weather this storm together and that our marriage is stronger than neighborhood gossip. But he won't look me in the eye when he says it, and he's been sleeping in the guest room since Monday. And Emily? Still maintaining her innocence, but she's cracking. Lisa told me she broke down crying at work yesterday and had to leave early. Her boss pulled her aside to ask if her personal problems were affecting her ability to focus on her clients. The neighborhood Halloween party was scheduled to begin at 6 p.m. in the community center, followed by trick-or-treating and a costume contest. It was the social event of the year in Millbrook Heights, attended by nearly every family in the subdivision. More importantly, it was the perfect venue for the final phase of our plan. Tara and I had spent the week coordinating our strategy through encrypted messages and brief conversations during her evening walks past my house. Tonight, we would force Sean and Emily to choose between confessing their affair publicly or watching us reveal evidence that would destroy any remaining credibility they had. At 5:30 p.m., I put on my costume, a classic detective outfit complete with fedora and magnifying glass, and headed to the community center. Emily had decided to stay home, claiming she had a headache, but I suspected she was afraid to face the neighbors who'd been gossiping about her all week. The community center was packed with families in elaborate costumes, children running between tables loaded with candy and punch, and adults clustering in small groups to exchange the latest neighborhood news. I spotted Sean immediately. He was dressed as a vampire, which Tara later told me was unintentionally appropriate, given how he'd been sucking the life out of their marriage. Tara arrived fashionably late in a stunning red dress, with a masquerade mask, playing the role of mysterious woman perfectly. She made a point of greeting everyone warmly, while pointedly ignoring Sean, who watched her from across the room with the desperate eyes of a man watching his world collapse. At 7 p.m., I took the microphone during the costume contest announcements. Before we get started with the judging, I wanted to share something with everyone, I began, my voice carrying clearly through the sound system. As you know, there's been some speculation lately about relationships in our community, and I think it's time we address the elephant in the room. The room fell silent. Sean's face went white beneath his vampire makeup. My wife Emily couldn't be here tonight, but she asked me to read a statement on her behalf. I pulled out a folded paper, actually a grocery list, but no one else knew that. She wants everyone to know that the photos circulating around the neighborhood do not tell the complete story, and she deeply regrets any pain or confusion they may have caused. Sean was edging toward the exit, but Tara had positioned herself near the door, effectively blocking his escape route. However, I continued, in the interest of complete transparency, I think our community deserves to know the truth about what those photos actually show. I nodded to Greg, my mechanic friend, who was operating the community center's projection system. The large screen behind me lit up with a crystal-clear image of Sean and Emily entering the motel room together, timestamp clearly visible. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Several people pulled out their phones to record the presentation. This photo was taken 3 weeks ago at 2:47 p.m., I said calmly. As you can see, my wife and Sean Blackwell are entering room 237 at the Riverside Motel together. The next slide showed them leaving the room 2 hours later, Emily's dress partially unzipped and Sean's shirt buttoned incorrectly. This photo was taken at 4:52 p.m. the same day. I'll let you draw your own conclusions about what happened during those 2 hours. Sean finally found his voice. This is insane. Alex, you can't. I can and I am, I interrupted, my voice still calm and measured. You see, Sean, when you called me a liar at Murphy's Pub last week, when you told me these photos were doctored or taken out of context, you made a crucial mistake. You underestimated how much evidence I'd gathered. The next slide showed a series of text messages between Sean and Emily, recovered from Emily's phone during one of her showers. These messages, sent over the past 3 months, detail their affair in their own words. Would you like me to read some of the more interesting ones aloud? Stop this, Sean said, his voice cracking. Please. Can't wait to feel your hands on me again, I read from one of Emily's messages. Alex is working late tonight. Come over after 10. The crowd was completely silent now, hanging on every word. That new lingerie you bought is incredible, I continued, reading from one of Sean's replies. I love how adventurous you've become. Tara stepped forward, removing her mask with theatrical flair. For those who might be wondering, I'm not a willing participant in my husband's affair. I discovered their relationship 3 weeks ago, and have been working with Alex to document the extent of their deception. She pulled out her own phone and connected it to the projection system. This video was taken in my living room last Tuesday, when I pretended to leave for book club, but actually hid in the kitchen with my phone. The screen filled with footage of Sean and Emily on Tara's couch, kissing passionately and discussing their plans to get rid of their respective spouses through a carefully orchestrated campaign of gaslighting and emotional abuse. As you can hear, Tara said, her voice steady and strong, They weren't just having an affair. They were actively plotting to destroy our mental health and self-esteem to the point where we would either leave them voluntarily or become so dependent on their support that we'd accept their cheating as the price of keeping them. The room erupted in angry murmurs. Several neighbors were openly glaring at Sean, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "So," I said, taking the microphone back, "I want to thank everyone for their patience while we gathered the evidence needed to expose the truth. Emily and Sean are welcome to continue their relationship, but they won't be doing it while lying to their spouses and manipulating their friends." I handed the microphone to Mrs. Patterson, who was serving as the evening's master of ceremonies. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with disapproval, "I think we've all learned something important tonight about the importance of honesty in our relationships. Now, shall we get back to the costume contest?" As the crowd slowly returned to their Halloween festivities, Sean made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. He approached me near the punch table, his vampire costume now looking more pathetic than frightening. "Alex, I know you're angry, but destroying my marriage isn't going to save yours." "You're right," I said. "My marriage was already destroyed. I'm just making sure everyone knows who destroyed it. We can work this out. Emily loves you. She told me so. This thing between us, it's just physical. It doesn't mean anything." I looked at him with genuine pity. "Sean, do you hear yourself? You just told a room full of people that my wife's affair with you is meaningless. How exactly do you think that helps anyone?" "I'm trying to—" "You're trying to save yourself. But it's too late for that. You made your choice when you decided to betray your wife and help my wife betray me. Now you get to live with the consequences." Tara appeared beside us, having changed out of her red dress into jeans and a sweater. "Sean, your things are packed and waiting on the front porch. I've changed the locks, and my lawyer will be in touch about divorce proceedings." "Tara, please, we can work through this." "No, we can't. And unlike Emily, I won't be giving you a second chance to lie to me." Sean looked between us, his face a mask of defeat and desperation. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," I said firmly. "It's been over since the moment you decided to betray the people who trusted you. Everything that's happened since then has just been the natural consequences of your choices." As Sean stumbled toward the exit, several neighbors stepped aside to avoid him, their faces showing a mixture of disgust and disappointment. His reputation in Millbrook Heights was finished, and everyone in the room knew it. It wasn't just the cheating or the lies or the way he'd tried to laugh it off when the first accusation landed. It was the look in his eyes when the evidence became undeniable. Small, slippery, offended, as if he couldn't believe the room had chosen truth over his charm. Someone near the dessert table muttered, "Unbelievable," and the word followed him like a paper cup rolling after a car tire. A woman in a witch hat crossed her arms and shook her head with the slow finality of someone erasing a name from a guest list forever. Even the people who used to defend him, the ones who loved to say, "Sean's just Sean," had nothing left. When a lie collapses publicly, it doesn't just break. It makes noise. And in a town like Millbrook Heights, noise becomes memory. Tara and I watched him leave, then turned to face the curious stares of our neighbors. Their eyes moved over us as if we were a new display they hadn't expected at the party. Two people standing upright after being hit by the same wrecking ball. Their expressions were complicated. Pity from some, admiration from a few, embarrassment from those who'd known more than they admitted. A man dressed as a pirate lowered his plastic sword and pretended to adjust his belt, suddenly fascinated by the floor. A couple near the punch bowl whispered too loudly, the way people do when they want to gossip, but also want to feel morally superior while doing it. Tara didn't flinch. She held her shoulders back and met their stares without apology, because she wasn't the one who had something to hide. "So," she said quietly, voice barely above the hum of the party, "what happens now?" Now we go home and start rebuilding our lives, I replied. Without the people who were poisoning them. Her eyes flicked to mine. Together? I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since this whole nightmare began. Not just as Sean's wife, not just as my ally in a public takedown, but as a woman who had been forced to reveal her core under pressure. Strong, honest, intelligent, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with makeup or designer clothes. She'd been betrayed just as badly as I had, and instead of collapsing into denial or bitterness, she'd stood in the center of the room and told the truth anyway. I'd like that, I said, and meant it without hesitation. Me too, she replied, and her voice softened in a way that felt safe rather than needy. We started walking toward the exit, and the crowd parted again, but this time it wasn't disgust. It was space. Respect. People make room for the truth when they can't argue with it anymore. On the way out, Mrs. Halverson, a woman who never missed a chance to judge anyone, touched Tara's arm gently and said, "You did the right thing, sweetheart." Tara nodded, and I could see the tiny tremor in her chin, the delayed shock catching up now that the adrenaline was fading. Outside, the air was cold and clean, and the night felt strangely quiet after the bright chaos of the community center. The parking lot glittered with frost under the street lights. Kids in costumes ran between cars, chasing each other with plastic swords and fake screams, unaware that the adults inside had just survived a different kind of horror. Tara pulled her coat tighter and exhaled a white cloud. "I feel light," she said, almost surprised by the words. "Me too," I admitted. "Like I've been carrying a weight I didn't know I had." We walked side by side without rushing. Behind us, the Halloween party continued. Music, laughter, the clink of cups. But the energy had shifted. The room would pretend to return to normal, but nothing would be normal again for Sean. The mask had slipped in front of everyone, and once a town sees your face, it doesn't forget it. As we reached my car, Tara paused and looked back at the building. The community center windows glowed warm, and for a second I saw sadness in her expression. Not for Sean, but for the life she thought she had, the dream she'd invested in, the future she'd planned. It's hard to grieve something that turns out to be a lie, because you don't know what you're mourning, your partner, or your own belief in them. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "Yeah," she said. "I think so. I can't believe how many people knew, or suspected, and still smiled at me." I felt the same sting, sharp and familiar. "They didn't want the discomfort," I said. "They wanted the party to stay fun. They wanted the illusion to stay intact." Tara's jaw tightened. "And now?" "Now they'll rewrite their memories," I said. "They'll tell themselves they always suspected, always disapproved, always would have said something if they'd known for sure. That's how people protect their self-image." She let out a humorless laugh. "So we cut them off." "We set boundaries," I corrected gently. "Not because we're bitter, because we're sane." Tara looked at me for a long moment, and something quiet passed between us. An unspoken agreement that we would not return to the old rules, where kindness meant tolerating disrespect. Then she nodded once, decisive. "Okay," she said. "Home." We got into the car, and as I turned the key, the engine's purr felt like a small promise. The heater began to push warm air into the cabin. Tara rested her hands in her lap and stared out the windshield as if she was watching her future rearrange itself in real time. As we drove away, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't thinking about Emily anymore. Not with the same sharp ache. Not with the same urge to replay every moment for hidden meaning. That chapter had ended. The betrayal had burned it down to ash, and ash doesn't rebuild itself into a house. You have to choose new materials. Tara glanced over at me. "Do you think it'll get worse?" she asked. "The gossip, The looks, the questions. Probably, I said. For a little while, Millbrook Heights feeds on drama, but then something else will happen, and the crowd will move on to a new fire. And Sean? She asked, her voice tightening. Sean will try to play victim, I said. He'll say we humiliated him, that we overreacted, that we ruined his life. That's what men like him do when they lose. They blame the mirror for showing their face. Tara nodded, and her shoulders eased slightly, like hearing it said out loud made it less scary. Good, she said. Let him talk. We drove through quiet streets lined with carved pumpkins and paper bats taped to windows. Halloween decorations swayed in the wind, cheerful and eerie at the same time. It felt fitting. As we pulled into the driveway, I looked over at Tara again and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Hope. The life I'd built with Emily was over, but maybe that wasn't a tragedy. Maybe it was an opportunity to build something better with someone who deserved my trust, someone who had proven, under pressure, that she could stand in the light without flinching. Behind us, the party kept going, but the real monsters had already been unmasked and driven away. The trap had been sprung, and we were finally free. And for the first time in a long time, I was looking forward to tomorrow. The next morning brought a reckoning that neither Emily nor Sean could have anticipated. I woke up in the guest bedroom. I'd been sleeping there for the past week to avoid any pretense of marital harmony, to find 17 missed calls on my phone and a string of increasingly frantic text messages from my wife. Where are you? We need to talk. Alex, please come home. I can explain everything. The neighbors are staring at me. What did you do? I'm your wife. How could you humiliate me like that? The last message, sent at 3:47 a.m., was the most telling. I never loved him. It was all a mistake. Please don't leave me. I made coffee and sat in the kitchen, watching through the window as Emily's car pulled into our driveway. She'd obviously spent the night somewhere else, probably at her sister's house, since all her friends had now seen the evidence of her affair. Her face was puffy from crying, her hair was disheveled, and she was wearing the same clothes from yesterday. She burst through the front door like a woman possessed. How could you do that to me? She screamed before she was even fully inside. How could you humiliate me in front of the entire neighborhood? I sipped my coffee and studied her face. I didn't do anything to you, Emily. I simply showed people what you'd been doing behind my back. Those photos were private. You had no right to... Private? I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. You were having an affair in our community, with our neighbor in places where anyone could see you. Nothing about your behavior was private. It wasn't an affair. It was complicated. You don't understand the pressure I've been under, the problems we've been having. What problems, Emily? What pressure? I've been nothing but supportive of your career, your friendships, your independence. I've never asked you to account for your time or questioned your decisions. The only problem in our marriage was your decision to sleep with another man. She collapsed into the chair across from me, tears streaming down her face. It didn't mean anything. Sean was he was available when I needed someone to talk to. You've been so distant lately, so focused on your car and your work. I felt lonely. So you decided to cure your loneliness by destroying 2 marriages? I never meant for it to go this far. It was supposed to be just a few conversations, maybe some harmless flirting. But then he started saying things you never said, doing things you never did. Stop. I held up my hand. I don't want to hear about what Sean did that I didn't. I don't want comparisons or explanations or justifications. I want you to pack your things and leave. Alex, please. We can work through this. Couples survive affairs all the time. We can go to counseling, take a vacation, start over. No, we can't. Because this wasn't just an affair, Emily. This was a systematic campaign of lies, manipulation, and betrayal that lasted for months. You didn't just cheat on me, you mocked me, plotted against me, and tried to gaslight me into questioning my own sanity. I pulled out my phone and played one of the recordings I'd captured from the garage. Emily's voice filled the kitchen. Alex actually thinks I'm working late to impress my boss. He's so pathetic and trusting. Sometimes I wonder how I ended up married to such a weak man. Sean's laughter followed. At least he's not suspicious like Tara. She keeps asking questions about my schedule. I might have to do something about that soon. Emily's face went white as she listened to her own words. You recorded us? I documented everything. Every lie, every cruel comment, every moment of betrayal. Do you want to hear the one where you and Sean discuss how to break me down so I'd be grateful for whatever scraps of attention you decided to give me? That's not... We were just venting. Everyone says things they don't mean when they're frustrated. Were you frustrated when you bought lingerie for him with our joint credit card? Were you just venting when you used our anniversary as a cover story for one of your motel meetings? Emily's tears stopped as quickly as they'd started, replaced by a cold anger I'd never seen before. You want to play this game? Fine. You think you're so innocent, so perfect? You've been emotionally unavailable for years. You care more about that stupid car than you do about me. You never want to go out, never want to socialize, never want to do anything but tinker in the garage like some kind of hermit. So you decided to cheat instead of talking to me about it? I decided to find someone who appreciated me, someone who made me feel beautiful and desired and interesting. Sean makes me laugh. He takes me places. He buys me flowers and tells me I'm amazing. When's the last time you did any of that? I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter, where I'd placed a manila folder the night before. Since you want to talk about what Sean does for you, let's discuss what he's been doing for other people. I opened the folder and spread out a series of photographs and documents that Tara and I had compiled over the past week. These photos show Sean with 3 different women over the past 6 months. Not just you, Linda Morrison from the grocery store, Jessica Chen from his real estate office, and a woman named Amanda, whose last name I haven't figured out yet. Emily's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, crushing realization. He's been cheating on you while cheating on Tara, I continued. You weren't special, Emily. You were just convenient. That's not possible. Sean loves me. He told you what you wanted to hear. Just like he told Linda and Jessica and Amanda. You were all just entertainment for him. I handed her a printed email that Tara had recovered from Sean's computer. This is a message he sent to Jessica 2 days ago, describing you as clingy and desperate, and asking if she wanted to meet him at the same motel where he'd been taking you. Emily read the email in silence, her face growing paler with each line. He called me clingy? He called you worse things than that. But the point isn't what Sean thinks of you, Emily. The point is that you destroyed our marriage for a man who was using you just as badly as you were using me. She crumpled the email and threw it across the kitchen. This is all your fault. If you'd been a better husband, if you'd paid attention to me, none of this would have happened. You're right about one thing, I said calmly. If I'd been paying attention, I would have seen what kind of person you really are a long time ago. I would have ended this marriage before you had the chance to betray me. The front doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. Through the window, I could see Tara standing on the porch with 2 large suitcases. That's my ride, I said, heading for the door. Your ride? Where are you going? Away from you. Tara and I are taking a vacation while our lawyers handle the divorce proceedings. You're leaving with her? You're leaving me for that pathetic, boring... I'm leaving you for someone who knows how to tell the truth. Someone who doesn't think marriage is a game where the goal is to see how much you can get away with. I opened the door and smiled at Tara, who looked radiant, despite everything she'd been through. Ready? More than ready. Sean cleared out his stuff this morning, left the house keys on the kitchen counter along with a note saying he was moving on to better opportunities. Classy to the end. Emily appeared in the doorway behind me, her face twisted with rage and desperation. Tara, You can't seriously be interested in him. He's boring and predictable and— He's honest, Tara interrupted. He's loyal. He's kind. And after being married to your lying, cheating boyfriend, those qualities seem pretty attractive. Sean isn't my boyfriend. This whole thing is a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion by jealous, small-minded people. Tara and I exchanged glances. Even now, faced with overwhelming evidence of Sean's multiple affairs and her own recorded confessions, Emily was still trying to rewrite reality. Emily, Tara said gently, I found Sean's phone yesterday. He has photos and videos of you that he's been sharing with his friends. You're not his girlfriend. You're his entertainment. The last bit of fight went out of Emily's face. She sank against the doorframe like a deflated balloon. I need time to think, she whispered. I need time to figure out what to do next. You have all the time you want, I said, picking up my suitcases. But you have it somewhere else. I want you out of this house by the time I get back. This is my house too. Actually, it's not. It's in my name only. We never got around to adding you to the deed. My lawyer will explain the details when he serves you with the divorce papers. As Tara and I loaded our bags into her car, neighbors began emerging from their houses to watch the drama unfold. Mrs. Patterson waved from her garden, Mr. Johnson nodded approvingly from his driveway, and the Morrison kids stopped their bike riding to stare at the woman who'd been the talk of the neighborhood for the past week. Emily stood in the doorway, watching us with a mixture of hatred and desperation. You'll regret this, she called out as we got into the car. Both of you. You think you're so perfect, but you're just two losers who couldn't keep your spouses happy. I rolled down the window and looked at her one last time. Emily, the only thing I regret is not seeing who you really were 5 years ago, but I'm grateful I figured it out before we had children. As we drove away, I saw Emily collapse onto the front steps, finally understanding that her carefully constructed world of lies and manipulation had completely collapsed. Where to? Tara asked. Anywhere but here, I replied. We have the rest of our lives to figure out the details. She reached over and took my hand. I loved the sound of that. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely happy. Emily and Sean had destroyed their own lives through their greed, dishonesty, and cruelty. They'd lost their spouses, their friends, their reputations, and their standing in the community. But Tara and I had gained something infinitely more valuable, the chance to build a relationship based on honesty, respect, and genuine affection. As we drove toward our new future together, I couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the best revenge isn't something you do to your enemies, it's something you do for yourself, and we were just getting started.